I would like to welcome everybody back to our next presentation. We'll start and let Dr. Michelle Vela go ahead and introduce our next speaker.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Brian Menaker, who's an associate professor and sport business program coordinator in the Department of Health and Kinesiology here at TAMUK. And he coordinates the sports industry related experiential learning programs, which have included apprenticeships, internships, and service learning partnerships with community organizations. His research explores the impact of sport on public policy, with emphases on security planning and issues in sport work and labor. The title of his presentation, as you see on your screen, is Using Embedded Virtual Experiential Learning Practices in the Online Classroom. So welcome, Dr. Menaker.
All right, thank you, Dr. Vela. And I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity today to speak with you for the next 20 minutes about something that I believe has been a really beneficial part of our sport business undergraduate program here at A&M Kingsville, which is the inclusion of experiential learning and service learning projects within our sport management classes. So the title of my presentation today is Using Embedded Virtual Experiential Learning Practices in the Online Classroom. And while my exploration today talks about particularly an internship class, much of my influence for doing this came out of embedded experiential learning projects in more traditional classes and face-to-face classes. And what I'd like to get out of you in our discussion is I'd like to figure out ideas for ways that we can use these strategies across disciplines and even in a collaborative way where different classes can work together in different areas. A little bit about my background. I'm a former coach and athletic department employee. Worked at the University of Iowa for a couple of years in athletic facilities, and then I ended up being a track and cross country coach for a few years. So a lot of my background is in planning and in event management. I was a competitive runner for many years too, and I continue to help out and put on races. So a lot of my experiences I impart to my students. So let's talk a little bit about how experiential learning and sport management are intertwined. It's critical for higher education to involve experiential learning. It gets people out of the classroom. It allows our students to interact with us as instructors in ways that they don't necessarily interact with us in a traditional classroom setting. And particularly in sport management, breaking into the sport industry for initial opportunities remains challenging. In order to have your first experience, you have to have experience, which is challenging when you don't have experience. So sports industry jobs require entry-level workers to have proven experience in the field. They want you to have worked in multiple organizations. They want you to cover varying skills, preferably sport and physical activity related or administrative and or management. But just because you have a degree in sport business or sport communication or sport management or sport administration, whatever may be called at an institution, doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a job in sport. Anyone with a well-rounded education, higher education, is going to be desirable for sport organizations. And sport management scholars have over the years discussed the challenges in delivering meaningful practicum experiences. In a lot of cases, when we do the internships with sport organizations, often these opportunities are not meaningful. The interns are putting wristbands on people or running coffee or doing things that are not really helpful for them in their professional development. So being able to figure out how we can give our students meaningful experiences that are practical and applicable to the sport industry is a challenge. So last summer, we had to pivot in course mode. So the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, shut down much of the economy, including sport. And it impacted all forms of sport-related labor, including interns. And a lot of people in sport, especially in sport events and sport venues, are what we would consider to be contingent or precarious labor. They're part-time workers or seasonal workers, and interns are often in that category. So when there's no sport, there is no work for those people. There are no internships for those people. Well, that caused a problem. So in the summer, we usually have internships to send people to. We didn't have any, we canceled the course. Well, our students need 2 unique internship sites in sport business degree program, and they need that in order to graduate with the degree in kinesiology with a concentration in sport business. This was a challenge when you have students who are ready to graduate and there are no sites. And it was unclear whether we could deliver internships or sport management roles in a virtual mode when we didn't have the physical mode available. Well, virtual internships are not new. These predate the pandemic. Internships tend to be place-based, but virtual internships are an option to in-person experiences when travel and or remoteness serve as access barriers. In Kingsville, Texas, we are relatively close to major cities, but we are somewhat remote if you're comparing someone from, the Boston, New York, Washington metropolis, where there are tons of sport opportunities. So in order to get professional sport opportunities or even amateur sport opportunities in the administration or sport industry or management setting, for the most part, students need to travel if they're not going to be able to work with an athletic department or with a few of the minor league teams that are in Corpus Christi or in the Valley. Again, those opportunities did not exist in the summer or the fall, and those are usual opportunities that we give to our students. Virtual internships also provide opportunities for underrepresented groups who often face structural inequities in obtaining industry-specific experience while helping students grow service-related capabilities to deliver value to partners. This has been particularly studied in hospitality and tourism. In the summer, a number of us in the Texas Sport Management programs got on a Zoom call and we discussed what can we do with internships. And a few colleagues had talked about how they had used some project management programs in collaboration with partner sports organizations. But they were simulations, but they were able to work with individuals from the sport organizations. In some cases, these individuals, the sport organizations, professional sport organizations, didn't have anything going on because their teams were paused. So they were able to work with the students who would need to graduate in the summer. Well, by this time, it was August, and I had to figure out, what am I going to do with the internship students? We're going to offer a class. We need to do something. And we need to do something meaningful. I don't want to just do something that is a simulation where the work is not going to get used and where the students feel like they aren't doing something productive. Also keeping in mind was a framework for embedded experiential learning, which my colleague and I developed in a study about 5 years ago. This was based on our work with a professional baseball team in Major League Baseball dealing with ticket sales. We interviewed the students and assessed their perceptions of what a beneficial embedded experiential learning program would be. So this was embedded into a class that I taught And we saw that 6 main things emerged for our framework. It needs to be student-centered. It should not be centered on the organization, because in some cases the students thought the organization is using us to sell tickets. We don't feel like we're valuable. We feel like we're free labor. They wanted it to be tied to research and theory and discipline. They didn't say those words, but that emerged from the data. Ethical behavior from all was expected and should be involved in an experiential learning program. There needs to be clear definition of educational experiential components. There needs to be clear expectations set. And the program needs to outline the structure for feedback and assessment. So one of the things about that program, that was driven by the sports organization. So coming from that experience and that research, one of the things that I kept in mind was I want to do something where I have some level of agency to be able to define what we're going to accomplish. So that led me to a virtual project-based sports internship that was necessitated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So EDKN 4328 is the course. You need to take that twice. It's a 3-credit course, which is also a little bit different. A lot of internships at other institutions end up being an entire course where students can travel and immerse themselves in the work of the organization. That is not possible for our students, so it needs to be something that is flexible. So I identified 3 things that were related to projects that I've done in the past, and then also places where I had a relationship with the tournament director. And the main thing that I thought about too was this can continue to be a service learning project as well as part of this internship. So there were 3 things that I decided we could do. A virtual running and walking club, which was an extension of a prior university-funded service learning project where we did a running and walking club. And that was actually tied in with a few other colleagues. If anyone's interested about that, I can talk about that offline, about what we did with that. But we merged that. I took the framework for that and said, let's do a virtual running and walking club. We need to be socially distanced. People are having trouble exercising. Let's do something that can promote exercise. The Kingsville Cross Country Open was something that emerged out of the running and walking clubs. It's a free cross country race. So the virtual running walking club, I had 3 students work on that. There were 3 students who I worked with individually with the Kingsville Cross Country Open, and then a high school team tennis tournament with the main idea of producing a standard operating procedure. And I had 3 students as well working on that. So a little bit more detail on the specific projects. So like I mentioned before, the virtual running and walking club emerged from an established community running and walking initiative. We had set up a Facebook site, some other social media, and the idea was to promote walking and running during the pandemic and to do something in a way where we could develop management of this program for the students who were involved. So we developed a website, we rebranded social media accounts, we met using the Blackboard Connect feature, or the Collaborate actually, I don't know what's Connect, but so Blackboard Collaborate video chat feature. And we met mostly weekly, and we discussed what our strategies would be for developing the program, managing the program, marketing the program, and creating standard operating procedures so they could be turned over to someone else if they wanted to run with it, no pun intended. The next project was working with Kingsville Cross Country Open, which is a race that I've put on in 2018 and 2019. We've done 4 of them. Usually our goal is to do 1 in the spring and 1 in the fall. We've generally done this at Dick Clayburgh Park. The spring 2020 event was planned to be at our rec fields and it was canceled due to the pandemic. When we feel comfortable with having a number of students together to put on an event, a mass event like this, we will do it again. However, planning activities can be done at any time and anywhere. And that's been one of the main discussions that I've had with the 3 individuals who've worked with me. This one has been different. I've worked one-on-one with each of the 3. And much of this has entailed course design. So going into this project, I spelled out, look, we need 120 hours. That's what we're required to do. We need to define some races. If you want to come up with a new event, like a relay event, if you want to come up with a series, we can do that. We can come up with the materials needed, the equipment needed, the flyers, sponsorship packets, standard operating procedures, which is a pattern, as you may see. And much of the activities entail course design. And I was able to show too that course design can be done in another city. You can use online tools. You can use other things to draw the courses. Because again, one of my students said, you know, I'm not going to be in Kingsville. This is my only class. Am I going to be able to do this? And my point was, yes. Part of the point of a virtual internship is to show that we can do things in another part of the country or another part of the state and effectively execute what we need to do. The third one, and in my opinion, probably the most successful, was the planning of a team tennis tournament. And one of the reasons I chose this was somebody I've known for my entire life, my older brother, has put on as a volunteer a team tennis tournament, which is a de facto New York City metropolitan area championship. And I asked him in the summer, I said, I'm having trouble finding things that I can sell to my students that they'll see as meaningful. Do you need help with the San Marco Tennis Invitational? He said, you know, yeah, I don't think it's going to be 120 hours. I said, well, do you have a standard operating procedure? Do you have pamphlets? Do you have templates for your programs? He said, no, we have committee meetings every year. Quite frankly, it's a waste of time. I said, okay, will you meet with my students virtually and guide them through this? He said, yeah, you know, I'll absolutely do that. So we met 4 times for about 2 hours. And he told them the story of the tournament. He told them the story of New York State high school administration, athletic administration bureaucracy, which is very different from Texas bureaucracy, which the students who worked with it were enthralled with, because when you're at that level of sport management, you really like administration, you really like planning. It's a planning discipline. So the products we came out with were a handbook for the coaches, a tournament program and draw. And again, myself and the tournament director guided the students through doing these things. You know, we came out with completed products. The students were really appreciative of my time and tournament director's time. And it proved to be something that was a big service to the tournament, which is going to happen in about a month. And they have a lot of preparation that was done. And I think the students felt that they had really done something for the sport community. So in assessing this project, the students produced a portfolio reflecting on the experiences gained in the project, how student learning outcomes were met. So we defined the student learning outcomes in the beginning of the course. In their reflections, they talk about those student learning outcomes. They're also asked to reflect on student learning outcomes that they experienced in other courses. So how prior coursework informed activities in the internship. And the main point was that the students ended up in a time when direct sport management interaction was impossible. They learned a lot about sport management and project management, and also learned that a lot of project management can be done without leaving your office or leaving your home. From my point of view as an instructor, this course was, I guess, sort of designed as a way of course as organization or course as business. One of the things that I find important with internships is to limit the level of exploitation that occurs. And one of the things that I thought was important, and one of the reasons why I decided to have control over this, A, and B, link this to things that I thought were related to service learning and were sporting events and projects that were service oriented, was because I thought that was the best thing to do at this time. In assessing it, it was put together hastily. And I lacked the ability to collaborate outside of the institution or my own connections. I didn't have the time to do it, but I did like having that control. That being said, there's a lot to be said about being able to assess our programs with outside organizations and having that feedback. And that's one of the reasons why we have our supervisors do evaluations. So I ended up evaluating them as the supervisor and as the instructor. So some future directions, which will hopefully lead to some discussion or questions, is to embed the virtual experiential learning into a non-practicum course. Quite frankly, I haven't had the nerve to do it. In this spring, I was worried about doing it in my my non-internship courses. Another thing that we could do is collaborate with professional or national organizations, possibly even collaborate with other institutions, other sport management programs. And there's a lot of opportunity on this campus and in other disciplines. Sport management is multidisciplinary, or actually goes across disciplines. So the ability to develop timing systems or registration systems or information systems or other types of things that maybe you could come up with, I would love to hear about. But there's a lot of potential for collaborating across campus as well. So that is my presentation. I will open it up for questions. Actually, I'll address the first question, which was from Dr. Flores, about are the internships paid? So one of the reasons why I determined that I wanted to do something that was service learning for things that had no revenue coming in. So all of the programs that I offer to the public are free. I don't charge. The team tennis tournament, the meet director is a volunteer. It's a free tournament. So I have trouble having students do something if there is revenue coming in and they're not getting paid. In addition, when students do internships, I encourage them to do paid internships. A lot of our students do not have the means or the ability to do unpaid internships. A discussion for another day is the appropriateness of unpaid internships too. Department of Labor has its current interpretation of what is an internship. An internship should be a burden on the organization doing it. It should be a training opportunity. The sport industry for a long time has used unpaid labor and has not really given people the opportunity to learn from that. So in designing this course or this virtual internship, I wanted to make sure that the students were going to be doing a number of different things, and were valued and were learning a lot. And then also that it was a burden on me, which might sound weird, but I also needed to be putting some level of work in, some level of instruction. And again, we're doing 3 of these, meeting 1 to 2 hours a week, doing some written work on the side. It was a lot of work for me. It was a lot of work for the students as well. So that was in addition to your question. But other questions or comments or ideas?
Yes, I have a question from Dr. Vela. It says, have you worked on a curriculum like this one with other departments or faculty outside of athletics in the past?
So I do, okay. So let me back up. I am not in athletics. That being said, we have a apprenticeship with, so we have a 1 credit apprenticeship, which they do 2 times, which is 40 hours. And then also an introduction to the sports industry, where I teach them about different areas of the sport industry. They work with a couple people in athletics who, again, go above and beyond and teach them professionalism, teach them event management. And they, so I've worked with athletics, and this has been not virtually, this has been them actually working with them. This spring, I gave the students the option to work with athletics or do a guided introduction to the sports industry, where some people from the sports industry have come to talk to them. I got 1 coming next week, actually 2 coming to talk. One talking about the area of youth and amateur sports, and then another talking about sports security. Other than working with colleagues, because we've had 2 service learning projects which have been integrated into exercise science and to sports psych, I have not done any work with this project outside of my department. So that sort of bridging into another question of what type of feedback I've received from students. The people working with the team tennis tournament absolutely loved it. It was funny because I had a lot of self-doubt every week in this program. I really felt like I had to sell the students on this because it wasn't a normal time. To me, it felt forced. They liked it. They loved it. And the benefit of that one was I had someone else to work with and some other information. And so he could give them a different style and a different perspective. The general feedback that I get is that this is really different and really challenging, but you've told us this from the beginning in all of the sport business courses. The sport industry jobs are hard. A lot of times they're not fun. If you're a sports fan, don't go into sports, is a lot of times what I tell people, because you may no longer be a sports fan once you sit down in the chair or do event. I usually tell the story about how I would show up at University of Iowa football games 5:30 in the morning for 11 o'clock kickoff, and I've just been putting out fires, mostly figuratively, sometimes literal in the tailgates, but kickoff happens, my back is to the field and I'm looking away because, you know, all the 70,000 people in the stands have no idea what people had to do to put this on. And so in some senses, I think the students understand, wow, this is rewarding, but this is non-traditional as work. And I think they realize whether they want to do this or not. By the time they've gotten to the internship and they've worked the race, I've woken them up at 6 a.m. in the cold to put on a cross-country race. They've worked with athletics. They've worked with the hooks. they know. So to them, I think they see it as another notch in their experience. So my students are blunt. They don't always, they'll tell me, hey, this is kind of hard. I think you're being hard on me, and sometimes they'll say yes, and I won't change because that's what we're doing. In some cases, they're right that I need to dial it back a little bit. Any other questions or comments or ideas for potential collaboration? One of the things that I wanted to say is I really do think that this approach can be used in almost any discipline. So I ask you and challenge you, no matter what your discipline is, to consider the virtual experiential learning practice, whether it's an internship or and especially working with virtual service learning or a virtual type of internship. I think it can be valuable, and I think the students get a lot out of it. And I think I'm out of time. So thank you again, everyone, for having me. And this has been an excellent opportunity for me, both as a presenter and as a participant. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.